And I'm really excited to introduce today's speakers. So we have two speakers from Trigger XR. If you guys don't know who Trigger is, they are a leading developer studio and creative agency. For over 13 years, they've been strategizing, building, and running XR solutions for the world's top brands, helping them launch cutting-edge AR and VR experiences. Through their tech experience and cross-platform capabilities, they have been able to work with brands to reinvent the customer experience while reimagining what's possible across areas in entertainment, gaming, retail, sports, and enterprise. We have two fabulous speakers with you today. Sharon is the VP of product. She has over 17 years of experience in creative problem solving, focusing on deep human curiosity to develop great solutions that leverage new technologies and achieve target outcomes. And then we also have James, who is the engineering manager, and he oversees a 10-person team of Unity engineers, and he's worked with lots of brands over his 10 years of industry experience. He's worked with Disney, Verizon, Honda, among others. So I'm really happy to have them present today. I'm going to kick it off to the speakers. You guys can go ahead and screen share. Thank you. So Sharon or James, whenever you're ready.
1 second. Just want to fill the screen so it's as big as possible. Here we go. All right. Can everyone see the deck?
It looks great.
James, did you want to set us up?
Sure. Yeah, I'd be happy to. So we're going to be talking about our experience building PGA Junior. The full app is called PGA Junior Safari Party. It's quite a mouthful. If you've been to a brown bag event in the past, we've talked about this from like a tech perspective. We've presented it at AWE and the Lightship Summit. But today we're going to be diving into it from kind of a different perspective, which we're really excited to do. Sharon, you can move to the next slide if you like. This is our sizzle. If we want to click and watch this, we can, or keep moving. It's totally up to you. This is just some of the work that Trigger's done in the past year or so. So like Chanel said, we do a whole bunch of mixed reality experiences, social lenses, enterprise VR experiences. A lot of our projects now leverage ARDK, but before that, we were doing a lot of our projects and AR work using Unity's AR foundation systems. But we absolutely love using ARDK, and that's kind of like our plan going forward, is to leverage a lot of the technologies that makes available. So in this, you're seeing, social lenses and some of our most famous things we've done for like the NFL, the NHL, which is this one right now, and some of the VR stuff that we've also built along the way too, which is super fun. Awesome. And some of our partners here, which are fantastic. Cool.
Was everybody able to hear the audio, or was I the only one hearing the audio?
I think you're the only one getting it, Sharon. I think it's okay.
On Google Meetups, it works, but there's some extra step.
No, it's all good.
Sorry about that.
Cool. And then moving along, these are kind of some of the info about Trigger that Chanel shared earlier. Like she said, we've been making experiences for over 13 years, and that means like before there was software to power AR, and it was all kind of faked more or less using computer webcams from a decade ago. So that was fun. We can move to the next slide though, and hopefully we can get audio for this one, because the audio for PGA is banging. It's fantastic. So I hope we can
I'll
Yeah,
figure out what I need
working.
to do to make the
So
audio.
Sharon, when you
Yeah.
click on share screen, in the bottom
Oh,
left.
I found it.
corner,
I
there's share
just found
sound.
it. Has everyone seen me put in my password now?
Yes. Cool. And this is just going to give a quick like little highlight reel of what the app's all about.
Do you hear it now?
Yeah. Awesome. Yeah. And to give people some background on that one, the experience is built 100% using ARDK. We're leveraging multiplayer and single player capabilities. From like a tech kind of AR standpoint, we're leveraging planes and marker sync. And at one point we were trying to figure out like how to make meshing work with this. But yeah, that's kind of like an overview of the app. It's mostly just to get kids playing some mini golf style, putting games together. And like I said, we're going to keep talking about this today, which is going to be super fun. And we've talked about this in the past from like a dev standpoint, but we're going to change it up today and kind of talk about it from like a business learnings and challenges standpoint, which I think will be really cool. So in order to do that, I'm going to hand it over to Sharon, who's going to lead the rest of the presentation. And if there are tech questions along the way, please chime in and I can speak to those too.
Thanks, James.
Thanks.
Yeah. I just want to say, when you're presenting to a lot of people and it's dead air, it feels kind of strange. So if you're not in like a really noisy place, feel free to unmute. Like I love to hear people's reactions and feel like you're here with me. And feel free to throw out questions at any time. I haven't been using Zoom as frequently, so I'm not sure I know where to look for a raised hand. I'll let me know if I'm missing one if somebody does have a question. So the thing I would like to say before I jump into the deck is that, a lot of the work we do is really trying to solve a business problem, also solve a user problem, create something of value that people will use over and over again. This particular example is a very lighthearted, experience. I mean, we're basically trying to celebrate and provide ways for kids to continue to grow their interest and love of golf. This one is not super focused on specific business needs, but there are aspects of the learning from discovery that helped us figure out how to design it. And so before I jump into that, I also should say, like, why do you do discovery work in the product space? And the point is literally you don't want to just build the coolest idea. You want to build something that resonates, that carries forward the brand values for your client, that understands the end users and what they're interested in and what their expectations are for interacting with media. And that there's a lot of things you learn during stakeholder interviews, particularly, that I think help you get some of the special sauce into a project. So the discovery tactics that we employed on this project were we interviewed stakeholders. I think there were 6 of them total, including the chief innovation officer, their East and West Coast directors, and 3 league captains from PGA Junior Leagues. These are all golf pros, golf enthusiasts, and also people who work constantly with children. And they shared amazing stories with me. We also developed an online survey that we were able to get into the PGA Juniors newsletter. We had to do it through parents. So the idea was the parents were asking the child the questions and entering their answers. So I think the time, for example, that they spend playing games every week might be a little bit underreported. But we got some great responses from that. We got 558 responses from members of PGA Junior League ages 6 to 13. We also did a pretty robust competitive analysis looking at other really popular golf games, other really popular AR games, and there were a couple AR golf games to really see like what's resonating, what's working, what's out there, where are there opportunities to improve. Any questions on that, on the approach?
I'm curious, did PGA approach you, or did you offer this as an RFP, or how was it?
Right. We were introduced to PGA through Niantic, through the business development group. So I think Arjun, who is the Chief Innovation Officer at PGA Junior League, recognized that Niantic's mission was very similar to PGA Junior League's mission, which is to provide opportunities for kids to be out in the world, being healthy, playing, exploring, developing. So.
Hello.
Hi.
Can I ask a question? It sounds like you did like quite a lot of research before you even kind of started to build. Was that something you kind of did prior to working with the client, or is that something the client asked you to do? Because it obviously doing all that work and then actually doing the design stuff I'm interested in, it's quite like a long process, isn't it? And is that something you did alongside them, and how did that work?
We did this as part of the project. It only actually took about a month, and we were able to be doing sort of pre-production activities and starting to, the devs were already playing with multiplayer AR. This was really to just understand like how to design the narrative, what was important visually, like one of the important things is that golf is for everyone. And we wanted to make sure that the players weren't a particular size, shape, or color, right? So we ended up going with animals. There were things like that, like the flavor of how we did it very much was influenced by what we learned through this discovery process, but it didn't really hold anything up because there was so much technical work to be done. Correct me if I'm wrong, James, but multiplayer was really new when we started this project.
Yeah, it was a complete learning experience. Like we worked through all the different solutions that the ARDK makes available for multiplayer and learned for more or less the hard way why one approach might work in a park versus another approach that might work in your bedroom. So we had plenty to keep us busy on the dev front for months, like leading up until when this discovery was done.
And we don't do deep product discovery work for like every kind of project that Trigger does. We only do this for things that really are meant to have a long life and be used over time and solve a problem repeatedly. Something that might evolve for like a campaign or a marketing, experience. We would do a little bit. We do like sort of product light because you want to go in there with some insights, but this one we were able to go a little deeper on. Okay. So these are some of the things we learned. This is sort of an example of the outcome of the discovery process. The statement of purpose for PGA Junior League is to enrich lives through experiences that transcend golf. And the thing that they shared with me that I thought was super interesting is that their innovation is that they've made golf into a team sport. They've changed up the way they play it, and they actually use it to sort of teach, all kinds of team building things about integrity and consideration, and even their onboarding process even teaches them about things like, think about the groundskeeper, leave the course the way you found it. If you dig a hole, fix it, that sort of thing. So basically, building good citizens is a big piece of what they're all about. They have core values, so safety, care, and organization. And I just touched on some of these. Like, these are really important aspects for PGA Junior League. I'm going to go quickly through these because I think it's more important to talk about how we got some of this into the game. Target audience, we landed on the players aged 6 to 13 and looking at visual appeal, targeting sort of 10-year-olds. They also have players who are 13 through 17, but we didn't focus on those. And just to give you in terms of how big they are, in 2019, they had 60,000. I don't know what their current number is. They went down a little bit during COVID, and then I think spiked right back up, but I just don't have that number. This was really interesting, and a piece I think is super critical to product discovery is coming up with your user stories. So, and currently, as we're trying to think about ways to promote and create more awareness and promote user acquisition, we come back to these and go, hey, are there opportunities within these where we could think of a different way to market this internally or externally? So as an organization, PGA wants to grow interest in the game of golf. As an organization, they want to amplify their brand values. PGA Junior League wants to provide a playful engagement opportunities for existing and potential players. Together, Niantic and PGA want to promote healthy outdoor play. Niantic wants to showcase an inspirational application of their new ARDK for gaming, especially multiplayer. As As a PGA Junior League captain, I want activities that my players can engage with when games are canceled due to inclement weather. That's something that comes up a lot. They might show up and then the weather changes drastically. As a PGA Junior League captain, I want activities that build excitement about playing golf, and resources that teach golf fundamentals, and also a potential homework. We didn't end up building the game to be super golf educational heavy. So I definitely don't think we delivered on the last bullet, but these were guiding things to help us think about how this game would be used. Like when you're building a product, you want to know the context in which it's going to be utilized and how it can add the most value. So understanding that backstory helps with that. This is probably my favorite thing, is there's some of the creative things we learned that I would not have imagined. And the kinesthetic and auditory aspects of golf, which we did get into the game, and this is actually playable. That apparently is the most satisfying sound to a young golfer, the pure shot. We also learned about like the 4 main types of shots. We learned that jerseys have a lot of meaning in the junior league. There are phrases of encouragement that they use all the time. They also have a lot of tradition around handshakes and acknowledging each other at the end of the game. You even you lift your hat up so that you can see their eyes when you shake your hand at the end of the game. And so this was just some of the advice that we got from the coaches and captains. Player survey results. So first we talked to them about what they love about golf. So these are some of the responses around golf specifically. We wanted to look at what sort of devices they have, how many of them actually play mobile games, because 6 to 13 is a very big range and a lot of differences among the children in those ages. What were their top favorite games? Their top 4 game motivations, so rewards. What are their top favorite golf games? I was surprised by this number. I didn't realize Pokemon Go has aged up, and the people that I know that play it still play it, which is pretty awesome. Success for Niantic. So when we talked to the team there, we were told a high level goal, achieve a 4-star or higher rating, which I'm proud to say we did. We're currently at 5 on iOS. And really this was a showcase piece. What does success look like for PGA Junior League? And this is an example of like trying to understand all your stakeholders, right? For PGA Junior League, these are the clear top 5 goals. Changing perceptions was number 1. Number 2 actually ended up not getting into the final game, and I'll explain why. It has a lot to do with child privacy stuff. Clicking through to new websites, even if you control it through a web view, if that site has links out, it ends up becoming this ripple effect of complication of like sending a kid who knows where into the internet. So the decision was made by PGA Junior League's legal team that we should just leave it out. And it was a little awkward anyway, frankly, because if you clicked through to sign up now, then you had to hand your phone over to your parent to sign you up. So I want to avoid those kinds of awkward threads that don't follow through. Teaching golf fundamentals, we did get the basics in, and we got them in a really playful way. 4 and 5, I wish we could have had time. We have ideas about how we would have liked to have built that in, which I'll talk about a little bit at the end. But we were really focusing on 1 and 3 and just creating a delightful experience that if you're really excited about something and you get to continue involved with it, it amplifies your excitement about the sport. So our target outcomes were installs, replayability, obviously, so engagement. I think, the important thing is average DAUs over time and game achievements. We did not end up building in things like leaderboards where there was like competition, because that also got into COPA complications. Try to say that 3 times fast. And that was also a really interesting bit of learning. I mean, building a game that's targeting children under 13 comes with a lot of responsibility. We dug into it a little bit, and I actually reached out to a whole bunch of personal friends and colleagues from my previous life in educational multimedia, and was like, how do you do this? You know, who do you talk to? There's no one guide that says how to make sure you're actually following COPA regulations, which are really, really huge and wordy and hard to understand. And we found out about this group called KidSafe. And we actually brought them on as a consultancy and also to do the final review so we could get their badge, which I think makes parents feel good. They go above and beyond what COPA requires, and you have a seal that you can put into your game that says it's KidSafe and COPA certified. Some of the things we learned about that were the links out, which I mentioned. User accounts are complicated because they stop the kid from playing, and then they have to ask their parent to go in and do something, and then go to their email and give overt consent. So we didn't want to build that complexity into the experience. We also didn't want to use our scope to focus on account management. We really wanted to build a fun golf game. So one of the decisions that was made through the process of learning all this was, we're going to do in-person multiplayer, because then you don't have to find friends. We don't have to connect people remotely, which has privacy concerns related to it. And it ended up just being really fun. And maybe you could talk about this a little bit, James. We pivoted at some point about how kids would connect in person to play a game, and the QR code ended up making it super easy and delightful.
Definitely. Yeah, I can chime in a little bit there. Beyond that, it totally like streamlined the experience. Like it was like a win from like a tech standpoint, because the marker sync technology is generally better for larger outdoor spaces than I think one of the default scanning approaches that ARDK multiplayer offers. So it was really just a win-win, because it streamlined joining and getting people into these sessions together, and it also improved like the tracking of all the AR features. So that was like one of the biggest tech learnings is why and what the benefits were of moving from basic like ARDK scanning into marker sync.
Yeah, and we did some in-person player testing at 2 different golf courses when we got to sort of our alpha build. And it was really fun to watch, to see like, could they figure it out how to join a game together? And this was mid-COVID, so kids have been scanning menus on QR codes. They were like, oh yeah, they like didn't even need to be told. They saw it and they knew exactly what to do. And we had some great learnings from that. I mean, that's another piece that's not part of discovery, but gathering direct user insights, getting player testing data, understanding where they get stuck, what they understand, what they do. One interesting observation I think it's worth sharing is, when you are starting a game and you see the game draw out in your physical space, now there's a golf course sitting in front of you. I'd say about 70% of the kids immediately walked around, and some just never moved at all. They were just like, okay, I got to hit the ball, But the first experience of seeing gameplay in world space in 3D was really fascinating, and how they used it to their advantages was also really interesting. In our first build, we had some floating targets that were really, really hard to hit. And I watched a kid walk around an iceberg for 10 minutes trying to figure out how to get a better, line of shot on that one. It was very cute. And so I wanted to share also I can't share sort of the high level, our analytics, but I wanted to share this because I think this is really important. We launched in May 27th of this year. And we looked at the data to understand like how players were using the game. And I was really delighted with what we saw, which is that users are completing all of the holes across all of the courses in both single and multiplayer. So we didn't build any that were too hard to finish, but we did see the average score get steadily higher, which, in golf, you want your par to be low, right? So a high score in golf is a lower score. Which just basically confirms that each level was a little harder, which is great, especially if you're working with a range of ages. Like the couple of 12-year-olds that came to user testing whizzed through the first biome really fast. But when they hit that moment of challenge, that's when they were like, oh. and you had them, because you know, things are too hard or too easy. You either get bored or frustrated. So I felt like the team did a really good job leveling the difficulty and creating a steadily increasing challenge experience. Also, the average game time per session, engagement time per session was about 5 minutes, which I think is a really strong, considering the games are pretty quick. It's also about when your phone heats up. So there's that factor. That's something I hope, you know, in the future we can all figure out together. A lot of these new technologies do heat the phones up.
Yeah, and this was actually cool because this is like right within that sweet spot of where we wanted to be while leveraging ARDK. I think the recommended session length for ARDK is like right around that 5-minute mark. So it's great that we met that and didn't really exceed that. It was definitely a win from the tech side there.
We might have exceeded it if the phone wasn't hot.
In some cases, probably. Yep. Lots of hot phones and dead batteries.
Some thoughts that if we had more time and more budget, we would have liked to expand that Rory is the coach character. And that was going to be our vehicle for really, you know, talking about things like inclusivity, integrity, patience, safety, care, organization, these brand values, and bringing that in another way. Another thing that just didn't, you know, that got on the chopping block was having some kind of virtual handshake. I'm not sure how we were going to do it, but this was still during COVID, where having a virtual handshake made sort of a lot of sense. And, you know, we wanted to replicate as much as we could of the things that they would normally do when they play a game of golf and they end their session. We also, you know, if you have in-app messaging, that can really help boost retention, even if it's just fully automated, like great job, hey James, nice to see you today, that sort of thing. That was just something that in the end we just didn't have time and scope left to build. And I think that we could have done automated in-app messaging without hitting into any new privacy, because it wasn't going to be capturing user data to create it, anything that wasn't locally stored. So, and that's my presentation. I would love to open it up for conversation. I don't know if there's anyone else on the call that's ever done discovery work or responded to discovery findings, but I'd be happy to discuss.
Yeah, thank you so much, Sharon. I'm going to share my screen so everyone can have access to the QR code again. So we did get some questions come in through the Q&A submission, so I can read those out, but feel free to scan this QR code or go to Slido and enter the code to leave your questions. The first question we have, not sure which one of you guys can answer this, but I'm curious about the use of portals and other forms of linking physical and virtual spaces with Lightship. I guess it wasn't a question, but maybe they want you to elaborate on it more. Was there any use of that in this game that you guys worked on?
There's a similarity in the setup piece of it, where you have to scan your environment. There has to be enough space. So it's basically in the scanning and placing of an AR element, yes. Portals doesn't take up a ton of space. It's, you know, sort of something floating in front of you, whereas this game, I don't know technically how big it is in AR space, but it feels like it's about 8 or 10 feet long.
Yeah.
So yeah, you know, if I was sitting here and I spawned the game in that direction, it might be out the window, and I might not have the opportunity if I wanted to walk around, you know, what do you call the things that block your play in golf? The
Obstacles, more or less.
obstacles. Yeah. That's the word I was looking for. Yeah, we didn't have sand traps so much, but lots of obstacles. And if you do scan something on world space, it did try to make sure that it was an uncluttered open space, so that you actually could move around it. And another thing we learned during user testing was with portals, you don't have an avatar. And when you launch a 3D avatar, the positioning of it relative to you is really important. I think in one of our early builds of the game, when you launched the avatar, sometimes you wouldn't see it because it was almost like underneath you. You were too close to it. So we realized we had to place it just slightly in front of you, and then it became obvious that this was your avatar. And we added some practice shots too, to get familiar with the mechanics before you started playing.
That's awesome. Thanks for answering that question. Another question is, what's a budget on a project like this?
So this was one of the several, I believe, commissioned projects that Niantic supported for Lightship's launch. So this one was 500K.
Awesome, thank you.
Mhm.
And then we have another question. What key things do you need to consider before building an app or game for an audience below the age of 13?
That's a great question. Key things for that. I mean, there's so much to unpack. I think getting them in quickly, like you don't want to have a long onboarding experience. Like number one, kids don't necessarily have long attention spans, but they like fun. So, giving them the opportunity to understand how something's going to be, and then pause it, if you need to take them through something to show them how to then use it further. But I wouldn't put that barrier, like that friction at the front of the experience. You really want them to get in and play. I think also it was understanding their words. Like I talked to these little kids about golf a little bit. We came to understand the way they talked about play, and trying to use, if there's text, understanding the words they use to say the thing, not the words you might use to say the thing. Right. I think one of the things we changed a lot, just in the UI, was like what we were calling things, join a multiplayer game, play with friends. Like there's a lot of ways to say that, and you need to figure out how to do it in a way that resonates with your target user.
Yeah, that was going to be my biggest note as well. I think design decisions go into that too, beyond the text. It's like large simplistic designs was a big part of like the onboarding that we chose to do, and even the instructions that you get when you get into like a game. But beyond that, I think kids are a lot more adept at using these things than we think. So they usually like got it dialed in before a lot of us would probably have the same kind of feature dialed in. So the assumptions there on how much onboarding they needed to, there's definitely some alignment that needed to happen to get everybody on the same page, I think.
You know how they say like accommodations that work for people who have any kind of special needs generally also are better for everybody else. I would say the same thing with UX UI for children. Like some of the initial like really rough mock-ups had occasionally like there were two things you could do on a screen, and I was like, no, give them one decision to make, take them to the next decision, which I think is the right thing for us as well. Like you want to be clear on what you're choosing, how you're moving through something, and getting to the fun piece. So I think we learned a lot about just really simplifying the UX UI to get into the game, to understand what your score meant.
Yeah, I think Sharon put a comment in, children are very aware when things aren't designed for them. And I think so as well. That's a great comment, Sharon. Thank you. We have another question. What kind of development challenges were you proud to overcome? That's a really good one.
Yeah, I can take that, and Sharon, if you think of any other ones too, chime in. But multiplayer was the big one here. Kind of figuring out how to anchor something really, really well in an open space that didn't have a lot of like unique patterns, or what would normally be like qualified as like anchor points for the ARDK, was probably the biggest one. I think that was a huge achievement. That was really just moving from the scanning technology into the marker sync, which was a huge win, because we kind of dove in blindly, starting to iterate on prototypes and get multiplayer working, and testing out lobby joining and everything that kind of came with that. So even at the start, we knew that scanning was like the starting point, but we didn't even know that marker sync was the thing until we were like a month and a half into development already. So pivoting at that point, and with all the progress that we had made up until then to the new kind of approach, was awesome. I mean, it was a lot to do, but it was a great thing that we were able to overcome.
Yeah, I mean, it's such an opportunity. This is something I happens a lot at Trigger, because we get brought in as technology partners with a lot of really great companies where it's like, this tech is new, go for it, trying to build X or Y. And, it's easy to get frustrated by how hard the work is. And I always try to remind folks on the teams, like, this is so exciting. Nobody else is doing this. Like, look what we're learning, look what we get to play with. And then also seeing, like, sometimes the design ideas are a little bit ahead of the tech, and then when they catch up, you know. That's really exciting. I think that's sort of where we're at like right now in the HMD space, right? Like the ideas we have for really compelling use cases for wearing the, you know, AR glasses, have not totally caught up with what the AR glasses can support. So.
Yep.
Yeah, that's great. And then I know you mentioned this a little bit more, but someone kind of followed up on the question. Is there a difference, any difference for designing UX for a child size than an adult size?
Yeah, I'm not an expert on that. Our art director definitely considered that in terms of things like the contrast and size of buttons. Again, I think it ends up being just as good for us, but really drawing your eyes to what you need to pay attention to on a screen. You know, you can make something really visually interesting and lose sight of the one button you're trying to get them to click. And things just like what grabs your eye, right? Like a big red button versus a word. You know, there's just, I think it's just basically good design. I'm not an expert to talk about how you design differently for children in terms of UX and UI. I know one consideration was the size of your hand and the way you're holding your phone. You got smaller hands, and that changes the way that you're playing with when you're flicking to actually shoot. Which is not even the right word to what's the word, James?
Like swipe.
Yeah.
Yeah. To tee off.
Awesome.
We have a lot of golfers on this call because I'm probably like butchering everything I should have learned about golf.
I'm not. Yeah, we don't have any more questions. If anyone just wants to unmute and ask questions, that's totally awesome as well. You guys can do that.
Diego, did you want to say something? Because I saw your hand go up.
Yes, but actually I posed the question. It was the last question.
Oh,
So,
nice.
not for a question for now.
I have a question following up on the portal idea. When PJ asked you to link into an environment, were they wanting a CTA that landed on a 2D website, or did they want something that would be a three-dimensional experience? Like, and have you had any clients go from augmented reality into a virtual hosted space?
Yes. So first question was, how did Niantic want us to do, or how did PGA want us to do it? PGA was really like, you guys are the game people, you figure out what's really cool. They weren't very they weren't guiding us a lot in terms of how it works. We did work really closely with Niantic to figure out the best way to do it. You know, like I think some of the initial ideas were that we would be using more semantics. We're not doing that. And then like, you know, when you launch the golf course in your world space, it doesn't curve around your couch. It doesn't care about the other things in the space. That it needs to look exactly the same to all the players, and it needs to be in an open space so that they can move around in it. So we really were just at the level of like clearing a space, and then you know, it appears in front of you. Am I saying that right, James?
Yeah, so we didn't want to use meshing because we thought that meshing could produce unpredictable results if the same like 3 or 4 people were standing in a room but scanning it from a slightly different angle. So that's kind of why we went with the design choice to curate and design these placeable courses ourselves and have everyone just share the exact same course. It's really just kind of like a balance of play kind of fairness decision.
Yeah, and a lot of the AR portals that we've built for other types of clients, including like Molson Coors, Verizon, and through Verizon, Super Bowl, Formula One racing, lots of different types of live events. You do have this experience of you scan the floor, you launch an AR element. That was one of our great learnings too, is that not everybody holds their phone at the same angle. And sometimes when that thing launched up, it was above your head. And so we animated it. So you were able to see the path of it to know where to find the thing, which was sort of a door. And if you could actually physically walk through it, or you could tap it. And at that point, it was virtual reality. At that point, if you would put your phone in a cardboard, you know, you would have been like, wow, I'm at the Super Bowl on the field watching the halftime show in full 360. Did that answer your question?
It did, yes. And actually, I heard a lecture about OVR and Decentraland doing cross-portal hopping. And I'd never heard about people going from one hosted environment to another hosted environment in VR. And so my interest is, do people like Time Bandits, that old movie where the kid jumps through the time portal? Do you have people who want to link between multiple devices? Or is it just the COPPA constraints are always going to limit any kind of outbound linking?
Well, a lot of the things we build aren't aimed at children, so that's not always a constraint that we have to work within. I will say our original portals had floating pins in space so that you could, with your eyes, activate and go into another 360 experience. It ended up being kind of complicated in terms of like the UX UI experience. Not everybody discovered the pins, or they would activate them by accident because they were looking at them just long enough, so we tried things like having them, they start to animate and to look away if you don't want it to finish and jump you to another place. Ultimately though, like we did a lot of optimizations around that experience of like, I'm in a 3D space and I have options to jump to other points of view. So basically other 360-degree cameras at the same event. And in the end, just having persistent visible buttons ended up being the winner. Like we saw the most camera changing, we saw the longest dwell time and the least confusion for people. And what's funny is you would think, oh my God, you've got such a small screen and you're watching a live event on a screen about this big and you're going to put buttons in front of it. They just disappear. You don't even notice them. I had to actually go back and look at videos I took of the 360 experience of the Super Bowl to remind myself the buttons really were visible. Because when you're watching the show and you're clicking around, you're just watching the show. You pay no attention at all to the UI. I mean, obviously you want it to be minimal, but that was a learning that we had.
Awesome. And I think, David, your hand is raised. Go ahead and unmute yourself and ask your question.
Yes, so my question is actually what was the most memorable moments during creating that VR game and just like or augmented reality game, and what's like the most inspirational things that you got out of it?
Great question.
Can I start, Sharon? Is that okay?
Yeah.
For the development of this, the most memorable part for me is like coordinating, getting everybody into a park somewhere in Los Angeles to test everything. Factoring that into the normal like development test life cycle, coordinating everyone to be offsite somewhere and fit that into everything else going on was hectic, but I think so fun at the same time. And then the rewarding part is like literally everyone I ever handed this off to when I was like playing it with my phone, had a good time. And then the number one piece of feedback we've gotten like to date is when are more levels coming out? So I think that's a super good sign and has me excited to hopefully build some more levels someday.
Yeah, I was actually trying to pull up my notes from player testing because there were lots of delightful things I learned during player testing, and I wanted to see if I could find my highlights. It was so long ago. Give me 1 second, if you don't mind.
Of course.
I have another question I can pose in between, if that's all right.
Mm-hmm.
I think everyone has seen what Niantic did in the Tottori sand dunes of Japan, where they brought thousands of people out to this completely desolate area in northern Japan. I was wondering, has any client ever said, I want you to help me move masses of people from here to there, like using the lure concept, or drawing people to the front of a store as part of the gameplay, like Pokemon Lure does? It's just such a great way to drive traffic. And I was wondering if you've had people engage you with that kind of project.
We are actually in the early stages of discovery on a project that would invite people to come to a certain store and basically play a challenge, multiplayer challenge we haven't determined what yet, but likely like a, something that there's rarity, an opportunity to purchase an item or to unlock an actual piece of commerce, but it's very, very early in ideation still. And again, I suspect the vision of it goes a little bit bigger right now than the tech. That's one of the things that we're looking at, like how many people can you have engaged in a multiplayer session simultaneously? Do you remember, James, what we learned during testing for that?
The number of like people in a single session is fairly low. I'd like to say less than 10. That's for like direct interaction with each other. There's a way where you could kind of abstract the ideas of that and have kind of like global events and like a quasi shared session that are triggered by people who may not be, you know, in the exact same game as you. So it's really like a matter of like almost like back-end architecture from a software standpoint of having people, you know, not in the same rooms trigger events that reflect for all players of the game, essentially.
I just found my comments from the user testing. Let me just see if I can get a nugget. It's just, some of it is just adorable and not necessarily like deep learning, but like, you know, we would ask them, was there anything you found difficult? Well, there's a weird red block floating in the screen. I mean, and some shots were easier to make. This is the kind of raw feedback. Let me see the ones that if I have that are in their words too.
The kids don't have much of a filter all the time, do they?
No.
Yeah.
Honest feedback is the best.
What did you like the most? But you can't really walk around. You need to stay in one place and it's difficult, and that'll make you play longer. Yeah, there's just some adorable stuff here. So a couple kids didn't like that the holes moved because it made it too hard, but they would also been bored if the holes didn't move. So I'm good with that. Yeah, they're just cute things. It was a really fun project, and PJ is really happy with it. So we're happy with it. I would love to be able to build it out, you know, to expand on it, get the leaderboard in, get some competition in there, which would require doing the whole parental consent piece. There's a way to design that it doesn't interfere with stuff, that it's like, if you want to do this, then go to this next level, and give them a good reason to go through those steps. Lots and lots of children's apps do it. It's not any problem. But I think that like having more of the competition features that people expect in gaming would also help with retention. You know, without push notifications, which is awkward when it's sometimes a borrowed phone, a family phone, your mom's phone, or the family iPad, right? Having mechanisms that remind you to come back and play.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I love the stories. And then we have time for one last question. So Anne, I see that your hand is raised. Go ahead and unmute yourself and ask your question. No more question. Anne? Anyone else besides Anne then? Have a question?
One question. Have you ever experimented with using the accelerometer for one of the game mechanics?
James, yeah.
Yes, yeah. So we originally thought about using the accelerometer in place of the swipe to like hit the golf ball. So we experimented with the idea of like pulling your phone back in space to kind of like wind up the shot and then kind of flick it forward to shoot the golf ball. Not as intuitive as a classical, you know, screen swipe, but there was definitely some thought that went into it there.
Thank you.
Yeah.
That's
My
cool.
one wish list, you know, for future projects is we find more ways to use haptics. I mean, haptics are one of the few things that are unique to this device in your hand as opposed to a computer, right? And I feel like they have such a good visceral impact, you know, that any opportunity to like feel something in your body from the thing that you're playing with, to me seems like such a great affordance that I think underutilize.
Awesome, thank you. Have time for one more question if anyone wanted to ask. Okay, I'm gonna go back into announcements. I'll screen share. One final reminder, next week we're having a dev workshop held by Circuit Stream, and they're going to teach us how to get started with shared AR. It will be hosted by them, so when you go to our events page, it will link you to Circuit Stream to RSVP, and they'll be hosting it. But I will be there, and I'm sure a few of our other Niantic or Lightship leaders will also be there. And then again, the research study is available if you want to get that. And look out for a VPS Developer Roadshow applications. And I think before we get off, I'd like to take a group photo if that's possible. So let me see, let me get us all into gallery view. If you want to turn on your camera, that'll be great. And let me count down. Okay. Let's see. 3, 2, 1.